Hey everyone, Aaron Davis from SCP Euro, and today we're going to be talking about the suspension on the MQB chassis. The vehicle behind me is an MQB Audi S3. However, this suspension video will also be used for older Audi models such as the Audi A3 or the Mark 1, Mark 2 TT or the Mark 3 TT, and of course the RS3 and the TTRS. Today we're going to be going underneath the car, looking at the common problems of the suspension and also go over the suspension layout. So what I have in front of me today is the strut mount and bearing, the lower control arm, sway bar end link, the ball joint, inner and outer tie rod end, the rear shock, and the rear shock mount. We're going to be going over all of this today in this video and show you how to diagnose when something goes wrong with them. Please note that the car behind me is an Audi S3 that has mag ride. That means it's electronically controlled. The strut in front of me does not have the electronic controlled sensor on it, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't affect the Audi A3, which does not have mag ride. So now let's get into it. We're gonna go lift the vehicle up and start with the front suspension. It's important to know when you're raising this vehicle on either a jack or a lift that there are actual jack points for this. On the S3, Audi was nice enough to actually put arrows where the jack points are. However, the A3s that do not have the side skirts don't have that. However, that still means that there is 4 jack points to do it, and if you do not jack it correctly, you can damage your pinch weld. So now on the A3, they probably do not have the arrow like this S3 does, but you will see the 4 corners that actually have the reinforced pinch weld right here. You'll notice it's there because the pinch weld is more up and the reinforced corner is more down, and this can actually hold the weight of the vehicle. So now that I have the front wheel off, you may notice that this whole front suspension looks a little bit easy to work on compared to older Audis. The older Audis do have 2 upper control arms, 2 lower control arms, and if you are familiar with the Audi chassis with those type of control arms, you do not have to deal with that upper pinch weld that always seizes up. Trust me, I know. This job is very straightforward, although it does depend if that upper pinch bolt comes out. That upper pinch bolt comes out.
The upper pinch bolt comes out.
It's not gonna go. It's not gonna move. All right, so we have the wheel off on the passenger side of the S3. However, this mimics the exact same on the driver's side. So as soon as you take the wheel off, the first thing you're gonna notice is the strut, which is this big assembly right here that actually holds your coil spring. And up top is your strut mount and bearing. So like I said earlier, that this Audi S3 is actually equipped with the mag ride, which means that is actually electronically controlled. So on the mag ride, it's actually used from the magnetic field in the shock absorber that actually can adjust the damping. You can actually adjust which setting you like in the Audi MMI, which is the radio screen. So the vehicles equipped with the mag ride is easier to diagnose because a full actual will be set when you scan the vehicle. Now, however, on the base model such as the A3 that does not have the mag ride, you're gonna wanna look for any type of oil leaking. Actually, out of the strut assembly, there is a seal that can go bad, and obviously you wanna see if there's any marking on this. This is a pretty strong material and this is wearing away. That's a really good indication that it's time to replace it. All right, so the next thing that you're wanna look for is the sway bar end link. Now these sway bar end links have ball joints with a rubber cap, and over time, these rubbers will actually rip and you'll allow water, dirt, and debris to get in there. And also when they do go bad, they rattle terribly and it kind of sounds like your front suspension is gonna fall apart. Usually when I have a rattle with a McPherson front assembly, I always disconnect the sway bar end link, go for a little road test, see if the rattle's still present. If the rattle's not present anymore, then you know it's time to replace the sway bar end link. Right here, I have a sway bar end link from Miley HD. It's a little bit more reinforced. However, you'll still see that it is the ball joint assembly, same rubber boot. But what's nice about these is on the stock one, there is a Torx in the middle of this that you have to counter hold to tighten. But on the Miley HD, they're nice enough to add this little slot right here. You can hold a wrench in it, and it's a lot easier to install. Also, when you take the end link off, you can actually move the ball joints. You can see right here, I can't really move it. But if yours is shot or blown, you're gonna be able to wiggle this all over the place. I've actually seen them so bad that the end cap actually pops off and you can actually see the ball inside of it. So speaking of ball joints, we're gonna go ahead and talk about the lower ball joint. The lower ball joint is actually connected to the lower control arm and it connects to the spindle. These hold everything together. So on the lower ball joint, you're gonna see that there's actually a rubber seal, and these tear over time. You can let water, dirt, debris go in there. You can actually damage the ball joint themselves, or also they can rattle if they are really bad. A good test to do is when the wheel is mounted, grab the wheel at 12 and 6, shake it up and down, see if there's any play. If there is, I would highly suggest looking at your lower ball joint. So another thing you want to look out for when you're doing the 12 and 6 test is the outer and inner tie rod. Now the outer and inner tie rod is located right here to the spindle. What this does is actually adjust the toe of your car. So if your car is going to the left or to the right, you want to look for these. Also, whenever you replace these, there's tricks, you can count the threads, but I really suggest you still go get an alignment for it to make sure you don't wear out your tires. So here's the outer tie rod end right here. Same thing as the ball joint and the sway bar end links. It has the rubber boot, has the ball. When these rip, you can let water, dirt, debris in it. This can actually throw off your alignment if they don't move properly, or these can actually rattle themselves. The outer tie rod connects to the inner tie rod, which actually goes all the way through the steering rack. Now these don't really go that bad as much as the outer tie rods, but it's still also a good thing to look out for. And also when I do them, I suggest that you do the inner and outer at the same time. Since you're already there, you might as well do it. Head to the shop, get the alignment. If you want to look for any type of play, you can also grab the inner tie rod up and down to see if there's any movement. This one has no movement at all. I would go up and down and side to side to see if there's any play. If there's no play, that shows me that the inner and outer tie rod are bad on this vehicle. So the next thing I want to touch upon is the lower control arm. So now the lower control arm is actually made out of stamped steel. The control arms themselves don't go bad, but however, this control arm does have two bushings located on it. This is the outer bushing. This is the inner bushing. The inner bushing is what connects to the subframe. Now, the tests of these are bad. It's kind of hard because you can't really see this bushing right here that's actually in the subframe. However, you can look underneath it, see if there's any cracking right here, or see if there's any play with the pry bar, which I'll show you in a minute. Also, the outer bushing, a little bit more easier to see. Also, another thing you want to do is look for any type of tearing around here or any type of play with a pry bar. Now, even if I were to install this brand new control arm with the bushing, even with a pry bar, you will still get movement in it, which is what you want. But really you want to go maybe even compare side to side from the driver to passenger side to see if one side has more play than the other. If there is, that's a good indication that it's time to replace the bushings. We do sell the bushings separately, but for an easy DIY at your home to do in your garage or your driveway, I suggest you getting the control arm, ease of mind, really easy to do. So now I'm going to use a pry bar to test out the lower control arm bushings. I'm going to use the pry bar, go to the bushing that's attached to the subframe. I'm going to push down on it to see if there's any type of excessive movement. There's resistance onto this bushing. That indicates that it's good, but however, if you do use a pry bar and you push down, the whole thing collapses, then you know it's time to replace that bushing. All right, so now we're going to go to the front bushing. Once again, just find areas to pry the lower control arm. You're still looking for that some type of resistance. There's no play in this bushing, so I'm assuming it's okay. Like I said, pry bar is just a good start to try to diagnose if the bushing is torn. So on the Audi S3, it does have a level sensor on the control arms, so if you are going to do any type of suspension work, I highly suggest you unplug it, you get out of the way. If you break them, they can be a little bit pricey, so just be aware, make sure your vehicle actually has it installed, or if it doesn't. So the next thing I want to touch upon, we're going to talk about the front brakes on the S3 and the A3. Now the S3 is equipped with big brakes. This brake disc is 340 millimeters compared to the A3 that has 312 millimeters. Also on the S3, they include this nice red caliper with the S3 logo right on it. So this car actually needs brakes, and the way I know that is you want to check the rotor out, see if there's any scoring actually on the disc, or a good trick is use your fingernail, just go down, and you'll feel a lip, which this S3 actually has. This is a really gnarly lip right here. So with that being said, I'm going to check the brake pads themselves. I have here the CTA brake pad measurement tool, 1430, that has millimeters on here, and I'm actually going to show you how to measure the brake pad thickness with it. So you're going to open up the measuring tool, you're going to look at the brake pad, use your best guess of which one you want to start with first. I'm gonna grab a 6mm, just because that's what I feel like it is. And I put it on the rotor. The outer pad is 6mm. Now, however, 6mm is in the yellow, which is still good, but that does not indicate that the inner pad is actually more worn than the outer pad. So I'm gonna use the same tool. I'm gonna measure the pad thickness on the inner pad to see if that is more worn than the outer pad. So I have the 6mm. I'm gonna put it against the rear pad. It's not exactly a 6. I'm gonna go down to a 5 to see if it's 5mm. So the inner pad is actually 5mm. So I know you're probably looking at this tool, the indicator is yellow, like you should be worried, but since this rotor is so lipped, we recommend that you go ahead and replace your front brakes. So on the S3 and the A3, there is a brake pad wear sensor on the driver's side. Once that light illuminates on your dash, that indicates it's time to replace your front brakes. So now that we're done talking about the front of the vehicle, we're gonna go ahead and inspect the rear of the vehicle. So we have the rear wheel off on the passenger side. Now we're gonna talk about the rear suspension. So the first thing you're gonna notice when the wheel is off is the rear shock itself and the shock mount up there. So right here is what the rear shock looks like, and this is the shock mount. So when these shocks go bad, just like the front, you're gonna see oil leaking out of them, and that's a good indication that it is time to replace them. Or if the ride quality is terrible, you should start looking at your shocks and struts. However, you can also see when the dust boot is removed to see if there's any type of wear on this. If you see wear on this, you should also go ahead and replace this. Now, when you replace the shock, I highly recommend you do the shock mount at the same time. You have to take it out anyways, and these are known to go before the shocks. These rattle like crazy. It's really annoying. If you've ever owned a vehicle even older than this, like the Mark IV Up or the A3, you should all know about the shock mounts going bad. The shock mount actually has a bushing inside. Over time, over the abuse of the roads, it can actually wear down and cause that rattling noise. Also, you should note that the shock itself can actually wear out on the shock mount and also cause that rattling noise. So it's a good indicator to go ahead and replace both if you can, especially if you see wear on the shock itself. If you don't see the wear on the shock, then you can go ahead and replace just the shock mount itself. So now we're underneath the vehicle of the car to look at the rear suspension. The first thing you're going to notice is right here. This is what we call the trailing arm. This actually connects the rear subframe to the spindle. Now the trailing arm does have a bushing on the inside. You can't really see if it's really worn that well, but you can try to look and to see if there's any types of cracks, or also you can use a pry bar, see if there's any play on it. You're looking for some type of resistance. If it's stiff, then I wouldn't go ahead and replace it, but if it feels really loose and sloppy, I would go ahead and just replace this whole arm. You can do the bushing itself, but you still have to take the trailing arm out. It's just easier to buy the whole assembly as one and go ahead and replace that. Now, next to the trailing arm is this control arm right here. This is more of like the tie rod arm. This goes right here to the spindle. This is fixed. You cannot do any type of adjustments to this arm. This is not an eccentric bolt. This control arm does have bushings just like the rest. Same thing, you want to look for any type of cracking. So if there is a crack or a big one, you want to go ahead and replace that control arm. Also use a pry bar to see if there's any type of slack in it. If it fully compresses, that indicates that it's time to replace the control arm. And just like the trailing arm, it's just 10 times easier to go ahead and buy the whole assembly than replacing those bushings themselves. So next to this control arm is this lower control arm. Now this lower control arm is kind of important because this lower control arm adjusts the toe of the vehicle, it holds the spring in place, and it also holds the shock. This lower arm for the toe, the bolt is right here. You can see it. This is an eccentric bolt. This is what actually does the adjustment of the toe on the rear of the vehicle. And then on the inside from that, you're actually going to see the sway bar end link. Now when the sway bar end links fail, you're going to hear rattling, or the handling is not going to be as good. You can't really see the inner of the sway bar end link because it actually sits into the lower control arm. Now you can use a pry bar just as the other control arms to see if there's any type of play. If there's excessive play, then it's time to go ahead and replace that rear sway bar end link. Next to the sway bar end link, you're going to see the rear spring. The rear spring actually sits in the lower control arm, And then actually the top of the spring is actually in place from the body of the vehicle itself. And next to the spring, like we said earlier, is the shock absorber. Now when it's time to mess with the rear suspension of the vehicle, I always like to disconnect the level sensors, which indicates for the height of the headlights. They're very easy to break if you do not disconnect. If they do break, they're very expensive to replace. So I would go ahead and remove them if you do any type of work to the rear of the suspension. So the last control arm for this vehicle is the camber arm. It's right here. It kind of looks like the wishbone. And this actually adjusts the camber of the vehicle. Now it is important to note that this camber arm, the bolt up top tends to seize, and if that does seize and you cannot get any type of movement on it, you will have to drop the rear subframe to cut it out to replace the eccentric bolt. So that about sums it up for the rear of the vehicle. Now let's head back to the table and close it out. I hope that you found this video useful on the layout of the front and rear suspension of the MQB chassis, and also how to diagnose certain things when they do fail on this vehicle. If you liked the video, please give it a like, subscribe. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment box below. And as always, I'll see you soon.